First of all, I think your analysis was very straight line. History doesn't run in a straight line.
Kid, you cannot tell your neighbor he is stealing ducks when you are stealing pounds.
As High Commissioner, I was wrong. As Charandas Prasad, I reacted naturally how any person would have.
I did not come here for that kind of abuse. I did not come here for that kind of abuse. If you're going to go along that road, I'll walk off.
But it's all okay once they're talking. If they were talking, I could not have been here today.
You got ADHD.
I got that thing.
Calm down.
I think I've done enough in terms of taking our team out of trouble from losing.
I'm reading the script now, and the first person that comes to my mind to play a detective, but an erratic detective, Mick Rodriguez.
Why an African slap an Indian? Why a man and slap a woman? Look, how you deal with that? You deal with that.
We must encourage platforms like this because it brings together different people and allows for discussions to take place in our country on a multiplicity of fundamental issues.
Gildarie, you apologizing for something you think I did is wrong. I don't want you to do that, and you should not have done that. Hello there. Welcome to the Gildarie Freddie Kissoon show. It's 5 hours in front of us from the UK. So it's good morning to Guyanese in the UK. Good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. This is the Gildarie Freddie Kissoon show. We come to you live 3 nights a week. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 8:30 to 9:30. When it's a call-in program, it goes to 10. We've been on the go for 10 months, and we appreciate your patronage, admiration, and interest. Along with me this evening is Guyana's famous journalist, or he doesn't like that term, so I should substitute famous. Guyana's enduring or well-known journalist, Leonard Gildarie. Our guest this evening was once in the studio, so he needs no introduction. But he needs no introduction for another reason. When you are a former president of a country, you need no introduction. The younger people may not remember Father Andrew Morrison, may not remember Walter Rodney and a few other people, but the younger generation will know just around the corner a few years ago, there was a president in Guyana by the name of Donald Ramotar. Now, what's interesting about Donald Ramotar is the longevity of his political activism. I have known him when we were very young together, so I know about the years and years, decades and decades of activism of Donald Ramotar. And then he achieved the zenith that any political activist would want to. From an ordinary PYO youth to a Gawu field officer to the leader of the PPP, he eventually became in 2011 the president of Guyana. So he needs no introduction. I can't call you Mr. Ramotar. We've known each other for too long. Donald, welcome again, and this will not be the last because there is so much to say, so much a former president has to say. As you know, our perennial journalist, Leonard Gildarie. I will start, the hour will be taken up, so I will skip the Gildarie methodology of reflecting on things gone the past week. I will go right into it, and then after my question, Gildarie will come in. Donald, there are things you cannot reveal because you're bounded by the Official Secrecy Act as a president. But one of the purposes we start this program is to record history. And we've had people who have said things here that were eye-openers. Ravi Dev told us that in his political activism, Dr. Rupert Rupnawine told him Rupnawine is more culturally comfortable among Africans than among Indians. I mean, that is because where Rupnawine came from, a mulatto Creole background. There are so many things that have been recorded on this program that we are happy and proud that we have recorded history. So in the next hour, we hope we can say things that you knew about, and it will be part or become part of Guyana's historiography. So my first question, and then Gildarie will come in. As one of Guyana's long-standing activists, but holding the position of being close to Dr. Jagan in the heydays of the 70s and 80s, then being the leader of the PPP, then being president, I want to ask you, bluntly and candidly, do you believe now that the Takuma Ogunse thing is in the air, now that we know the past 3.5 years what the WP has become? I'm asking you if you think, in all your years of activism, that Rodney was betrayed by very high officials in the WPA, given what we're seeing now?
Well, I always thought so, even before the recent events that came out here. The very fact that Rodney went to collect the walkie-talkie himself suggested that he knew that his party was riddled and infiltrated completely. Otherwise, he would not have done it. He just couldn't trust anybody, and even people around him. And I think that is why he personally went to collect the walkie-talkie. It's not that he was bravado. I know he was not he was a very brilliant man, very careful man. He himself, I heard him at Durban and the White Rose saying, "I have no ambition to be a martyr." But the fact that he went and he chose to go with him, his brother, maybe the only person he could have trusted, suggested to me from the time that he died that his party was completely infiltrated. The WPA was infiltrated since then.
By very high people.
Yeah. I think a lot of people around him, close to him, in his leadership and in the membership on the ground all over, including Gregory Smith. They are all infiltrated. I think the problem that Walter made and the WPA made is that after they had some initial success with some mass demonstrations, they opened up their party instead of they consolidated. I think they should have tried to consolidate the gains that they've made and be cautious, because the PNC is fundamentally a military type of organization. They create the GDF, they nurtured it at a very early stage, and they have a lot of military. They think the leadership of the PNC is heavily with people of military background, and therefore they use their military training to apply it to political situations. And one of it would be intelligence, to gather intelligence as much as possible, and executing what they do with the intelligence that they have. And in that way, Walter felt he was too much of a danger, and that is why he was assassinated. I wrote once and said this, because now you're talking about Ogunsai, that Walter's assassination was also a racial killing, because Walter wasn't actually saying anything new on the political scene that the PPP had not said before, and the analysis that he was making, the PPP had made those analyses. The difference was that the African Guyanese working class were listening to him, and the PNC lost the tool to call him a stooge, a coolie stooge, and so forth. And I thought Walter, as a historian, probably studied a lot of revolutions throughout the world. And I believe he studied the Cuban Revolution pretty closely. And although Fidel Castro was a Marxist, his brother was also a Marxist, communist, they didn't join the Communist Party. And because they would have been dabbed with anti-communism at that time was very, very high. And I think Walter also didn't join the PPP, not because he disagreed with the PPP, but because he knew that it could have been used against him to call him a coolie stooge. And it gave him more access to the African working class. And they became more receptive. And that is what Barnum didn't have an answer for, or the PNC didn't have an answer for. And that is why he was killed. And that by itself suggests that he was killed. It was a racial killing on their behalf because they couldn't use race against him.
Gildarie, just give me a sec. I don't want you to be specific, but as head of the PPP, a major institution in Guyana, obviously that would have been, obviously such a party comes face to face with information, and then you were president. Don't speak specifically with that because I don't think you would want to either. But do you think you have names in mind?
Well, I have some suspicion, and some of my suspicion have been confirmed by some of the actions and behavior of some of these people. The easy way many of them grafted back to the PNC suggested to me that they really never had any deep convictions to anti-imperialist, that kind of those type of convictions, because it was too easy. You couldn't go from one extreme to the other extreme that easily as they went, and so it suggested to me that really at pretty high levels of the WPA that there were infiltration.
Thank you very much there, Freddie, and thank you very much there, Mr. Ramotar. Obviously, I'm a student and I want to learn about how could our current situation here be used to improve the lessons from that, our lives in Guyana. I would have been paying very close attention, Mr. Ramotar, to the developments along the East Bank, along the East Coast. And obviously, you've seen a lot of lands being used up there, former sugar lands. Know your connections to Gao and then to the sugar industry, former board of director on the board of the Gaisuko as well. Where do you see Gaisuko in this whole context of Guyana, where it is at the moment? And what would you, if you had a chance to sit down with the upper leadership within the PPP, as government, and you had some advice to give to them, what would you say about Gaisuko, sir?
I would say that I was very enthusiastic when the government changed and they announced that they were going to reopen some of the estates and start back the sugar estate, because I honestly believe that the sugar industry still has a big role to play. Still has a big contribution to make towards Guyana. We still have not succeeded to transform the sugar industry from just being a producer of raw sugar to a more complex, which was the idea that we had. We were working on that when I was president. We had done a lot of work on that actually. One of the unfortunate things that I'm sorry that I didn't change the top management from the moment I got into government and bring in this boy, Dr. Raj Singh, who is now a high commissioner in London. He was a Gaisuko man before, and he had good knowledge of the industry. And I think the management that he displayed showed it was what Gaisuko needed. He was connecting directly with workers and things were turning around. Actually, our plan was to break even by 2017 and by 2018 to be back in the black with Gaisuko. And it was going in that direction. If you look at 2014 and 2015, Gaisuko production had reached target. The Skellen estate was the biggest producer of sugar in 2014 and 2015, the last crop of 2014 and in 2015, both crops in 2015. So the problem that it had, we were resolving it. And then the PNC hurricane came in and damaged the industry severely. And I think it was still salvageable because we have a lot of skills still around at Gaisuko, people who people who know Gaisuko very well, highly technical people, our own people. Maybe what was lacking is some good, strong CEO type of leadership that they needed. And we either could have looked and see if we found any among ourselves or import that. Because to my mind, the problem in Gaisuko is management. It's very, very clear to me that the problem in Gaisuko is management. The fields are in a mess. Because sugar is produced in the field. It's recovered in the factory. And that the field is extremely important, just as well as the factory, to ensure that that's recovered. But the amount of money that this government has put into the sugar industry, we should have had far better results than we're having at this point in time. If the government do not change the top management as quickly as possible and put in people just dedicated, some people in the management that just seem to be there just like the press. Every day, I know Gaisuko in the past used to avoid the press and try to concentrate on their work and their production. But these fellas are every day in the press.
So we fire the whole upper management now?
So I don't know if the whole upper management, they got some good technical people in there, but I don't think...
There are serious questions about the head guy.
The leadership,
serious
I don't think they
the
have this proper leadership in the industry at this point. I mean, the problem is leadership in the industry at this point in time. That's what I will say at this time.
But the problem, look, you and I, all of us experienced people. Gildarie may not be as old as us, but we know that in this modern world, you can't put a botanist to run a pharmaceutical company. My problem with the Gaisuko guy is that he is
Call
not...
names. Who is talking
what's his name?
Sesame
Singh. It's no knowledge, no background of the industry. And that's too huge an investment of state funds, too huge an industry to take someone who ran,
the industry will take a lot of resources to bring it back because it to my mind, we should have gone much further in turning it around than where we are now with the amount of money that the government has already allocated to it. And I think it's still important to bring it back. I don't know, but I think the window of opportunity in saving sugar is getting smaller unless the radical changes and decisions are taken now to save the industry. Otherwise, it's going to be very hard to save it.
And I was interested, but Freddie, just before you jump in there, and I know there's always been talks, not necessarily sugar, but whatever comes from sugarcane. Because at the end of the day, when I'm looking at it from outside and you look at all the factories, aged factories, and the kind of resources that need to put you back to where you want to be, and there's been some arguments from people who call themselves analysts that it might be better for you to give every person within Gaisuko or working affiliated with them maybe a sum of money and then call it charge and then use the
I don't agree. I think, look, the sugar industry is a pretty unique industry. Look, the world is talking now about renewable energy. Gaisuko can give you that cogeneration of electricity. Gaisuko can give you, we were on the process of cutting the cost of fertilizer to Gaisuko because India has developed the technology. In fact, I was very angry when I told them to look at India. They were developing from the industry itself liquid fertilizer. That would have cut the cost of fertilizer, which is a big expense in Gaisuko, by about 2/3. They were telling me they had to do some experiments. I say, if it's working in India, why you have to do all this experiment? Apply the thing.
That's when you were president.
Yes, when I was president. So I think we had a lot of areas where we could have cut costs, where the direction we were going very well. The factory, yes, some of the factories needed to be rehabilitated. My last visit as president abroad was to India in January of 2015. I had some long discussions with Prime Minister Modi. I couldn't be specific with him, but we did agree that he would help to give us soft credit soft loan and technical assistance to rehabilitate the industry. When I came back here, my instructions to the CEO was to make a list of what we need to help to rehabilitate a lot of the factories. But I must say, to give credit to the Gaisuco workers and their technical staff, factory people in particular, if you look at the recovery that they were still having, even with the old factory, it wasn't bad. It was very good. It was in the 90s, the 90 amount of the sugar that they were getting from the sugarcane coming into the factory itself. So even though the factories were old, the fellows were doing a very good job in maintenance and so forth, and keeping the factories working properly. So much so that our recovery was always in the 90s.
Just before Freddie
Go ahead.
Freddie, I got a serious problem with Mr. Ramotar. I got a serious problem in our CEOs, our executives who are in charge of these big corporations. I know abroad that they put targets, they put objectives, and you certain benchmarks that you got to meet. And if you don't, you're out of there. You look at big companies like Apple and things like those companies, and you don't reach those quarterly sales target, as I would put it, you're out of there, or something is going to happen to you. In Guyana, it seems as if it's a pat on the shoulder, and then we move on to the next thing. Are we dropping the ball?
I don't know for now, but I know that Gaisuco management was pretty tough in the past. There was a breakdown in the 80s, late 70s and the 80s. The production went down sharply. The PNC government brought in the Booker Tate team. That first team that came into the country was an extremely good team, management team. They did a lot. Neville Hillary, who was the CEO, was an excellent CEO. And they took really tough decisions. They did exactly what you were saying there. The agricultural man, the factory people that they brought were all excellent people. The quality of Booker Tate began to deteriorate too, because they were changing hands. This was sold out. They were having their own problems and so forth. Sold out to a company in South Africa, what have you. So when they started to change people, the quality of people that we were getting were less and less competent than we had. So we started to have problems even when that Booker Tate team was here. It wasn't always working well. Some of the CEO that they gave to us was not very, very well too. I will sing the praise of Hillary because I saw what they did. They did a fantastic. They added value to the industry, but some of them didn't add a lot of value. Many of them probably. We had people that were more competent than some of them that came later on. But they took, and I think Gaisuco, even our management team at one time, used to be taking the decisions that you were saying. Now I can't say, I'm not so intimately involved as they were before, but just looking from the outside, I really think that
some heads should roll.
That you need changes. You need changes in the leadership of the industry.
Well, I doubt whether the big boys in the corridors of power would not look at a show in which the former president is being interviewed. So maybe your words, let's hope your words meet with some changes. But I know as a journalistic prerequisite, when you're interviewing former prime ministers and presidents, there is a standard question that all journalists ask. Obama was asked about it last week in Australia. So now I'm asking you, there are two standard questions. I'll start with the first, which is the negative one, and then I'll go to the positive. What is your greatest regret as president? Obama said gun control. That when you look back now, that is what you wish, that thing you wish you could have conquered it or done it as president?
Well, my greatest regret is the fact that the opposition refused to work with me to change things around. If you look at my speech at the opening of the parliament in 2012, I think it's when we had our first sitting of the National Assembly after the elections, I said very clearly that we were in a new situation. but it is not necessarily the worst situation. It depends on how we deal with it. And I think we could have achieved a lot, and we could have forged a lot of unity if the PNC was and the AFC, if they were serious about, if they were really nationalists. I question their bona fides as really being nationalists, because how do you explain that? Let's take, for instance, the Anti-Money Laundering Act. How do you explain that when they did not have a majority in the parliament, they voted all the time to pass this bill? All the time. The moment they have a majority, they voted against it. That was aiming at the heart of our economy. And that was aiming at the financial sector. And some of the problems that we still have, the long paperwork that we still have to do at the banks and so forth, was a result of what the position that it put us in. The only reason we were not blacklisted is because the FATF and CFATF saw that we, as a government, we were doing everything possible, but we didn't have the majority in the National Assembly. So we were put on a grey list and had all of this complications that we have. The other thing was the Amila Falls project. We could have been having cheap electricity in this country a long time ago, and our people would have been paying less electricity for domestic consumption, and we would have had a more viable manufacturing sector. But they voted against it. They had no reason, because I see a lot of people talking about consultation, but it means nothing to those people, because I call them in and give them all the including sensitive commercial documents. And I asked them, I said, look, this is sensitive document, please don't make it public. I saw it in the paper afterwards. They still use it. And
both PNC and
AFC, I called them together. And then I had our team giving them presentation. And I said to them, listen, I know that you probably don't have your technical people with you, but I'm giving you everything that I have on this project. And you go and look at it and tell me if you have any questions, get back to me and I'm going to provide answers for you, get the technical team to provide the answer. Never came back with any, not a single query they came with it. I thought they requested that they wanted to go and see it. We organized the army to fly them with helicopter to go to the Amila Falls site to look at it and all of that. Nothing, and for no reason at all, they voted against it. The AFC finally voted for it at the end, so we managed to pass the bill. But the PNC held out and didn't vote for it, and the people were going to invest a lot of money. Blackstone people, which was the largest investor company in the West. And they walked away because they were saying, look, I had a minority in parliament already. If you have the election and the government changes, these people are going to abandon the project, which they actually did. Because the project never got on. They just abandoned the project. And that's a very, very good project. And I think, I heard particularly Vice President Gildarie over and over speaking about it in his press conference. And it was not going to cost the country 1 cent in debt because of the boat arrangement that we had. So, that was a big developmental project that they rejected. And there were many others. They voted against the development for Amerindian community. And all of that shows that they really didn't, they were working, to my mind, on the philosophy that if they can get the economy into trouble, that they will get political mileage. To answer your second question, I'm very proud of the fact that despite the opposition that I faced, that no other president had to face with a minority parliament, that the economy kept growing at an average of 5% per annum, which was about what every other president had at except in the 1990s when we had a higher growth rate. So I'm proud of the fact that despite the opposition that we faced, that the team that we had in government, we still managed to keep the economy going, and things did not worsen under us at that time.
Mr. President, Well, of course, there's this custom of calling former prime ministers and president, Mr. Prime Minister, Mr. President. There is a standard journalistic practice that when something is said about a famous name, when that famous name comes into the interview room, you ask him about it. So I'm going to alert my operators if they can look at this thing. There's a towering figure in Guyanese politics, but of course not as towering as you. You were the leader of the PPP, the General Secretary. You were president for 4 years. That figure is Mr. Ralph Ramkaran. Mm-hmm. He sat in the same seat where you're sitting, and I get the impression, I don't know if Gildarie did, that he will never overcome a fateful moment. And I think that fateful moment involves you, in which he felt his life, the life of the PPP, would have gone in a different direction if you had done what was expected of you. I'd like your reaction to that.
I don't know what he expected.
Well, we'll play. I'm asking our operator if he could play what Mr. Ramkaran said. It's not very damning accusation. It's just a sad reflection that I expected President Ramotar to have said this to me.
Corruption. I praise the government. I said the government has done a lot on corruption, but it now needs to do more. And I put a reason. I said, look, corruption will flourish where money is being spent. Under Desmond High, $2 billion was being spent on infrastructure. Now, $20 billion are being spent. So you can expect an increase in corruption, but that steps must be taken to curb it. I met Donald Ramotar at an event before the article came out. I said, I'm writing this article. This is what I'm saying. I hope it's okay with you. He said it's okay with me. So we had a meeting about 2 weeks after the article came out, and I was very violently attacked. And I was told that I'm not a person to be trusted. So Donald was in a chair. I asked for an apology. There was no apology coming. So I got up and walked out, and I was insulted when I walked out, when I was walking out. Now I had to go. I have a driver. I had a driver then as well. When he dropped me at the meeting was held at the Office of the President. Meetings at the PPP executive were held at the Office of the President at that time. So when my driver takes me there at midday, we go there to have lunch and then the meeting. When he takes me there, he goes out and does some chores for me. And then he brings the car at about 3 o'clock and leaves the key, and he goes away. And I drive home. So when I walked out of the meeting, this was not long after the meeting started, I had to go out. I had to call him to come for me. He was somewhere about the city, and I waited. If somebody had come to me, to call me back in, I would have gone. I waited for about 45 minutes out there. Donald phoned me up the next day. I was at home. I didn't take the call. No. If he had come to the gate and stopped the car, called my wife out, I wouldn't have gone out. And tell her I ain't moving from here. I'm not moving from here. I gotta come in. People can start coming and watching and looking. So he would have come in. He went away to St. Lucia. They ain't got telephones in St. Lucia. You can call me from St. Lucia. Okay. Yeah. 2 weeks after he came back from St. Lucia, called me on the phone and said, please and so on. Now, if I were the president and you were an important man, what I would have done is to call you to my office. I want to see you. When you come in, get up and lock the door. I said, none of you moving from here unless you tell me something serious about you and the party. We moving, we going away. We're going to sleep right here. Now, what could I have done under those circumstances? Not give in?
Yes, in the South, and 40 years of
So this is my home. This is people I've known for my whole life, you know. Friends I see every day. So, but when I left the meeting, when I left the area there, I was completely destroyed. I was deflated, destroyed. I went home.
Yeah, we could stop there.
Earlier than usual. Been earlier than usual.
He went on, and one of the things he went on to say is that how psychologically and mentally devastated he was. And he went on, and I get the impression in the interview that maybe he'll never overcome that.
Well, I mean, of course, some of the things I'm a bit hazy about, some of the things that he's saying. I remember the incident. I can't remember what the issue was now. I don't know if it was, as he said, it was corruption. I can't remember if that was the issue, but whatever was the issue, there was a heated debate and a heated argument, and probably it went a little personal and maybe some level of maybe. But it's not the first time we had things like this in the party. It's not the first time we had such big blow up and row and quarrel and so forth among ourselves, and we managed to work things out. I didn't know that Ralph was listening to what he said, you know. I had absolutely no idea that Ralph was outside for 45 minutes. I thought he had gone home. When he left the meeting and walked out, I thought he had gone home. And I don't know if any of the colleagues at the meeting knew that he was out there for 45 minutes. I really can't remember exactly what was the issue, but if he said it was corruption, we'll take what he said as true. I would give him the benefit of the doubt about that, but I really can't remember what was the main issue. But as I've said, to me, it was not a. I mean, I don't want to make it appear that if this was frequently happening in the party, but it happened before. We had high arguments and so forth. But I didn't know he was out there. I called him. I didn't know. He said I should have gone home. Maybe I should have, but I don't. I didn't feel that I would have been too welcome at his house at that time. But I mean, let me say though that I have always valued Ralph's contribution. Ralph made a tremendous contribution to the party. I always had a very high regard for the work that he did. I called him when he spoke to me. I can't remember if I went to St. Lucia or in that issue or not, but I called him and I talked to him, and it was then when I got his resignation, his letter of resignation, I immediately called him and said to him, you know, look, you're a valued member of the party. We appreciate what you've done. Don't do this. Don't withdraw this resignation. But what he did, I think he made it. He made sure that he couldn't withdraw it by making it public immediately and so forth. So I don't know who's to blame. I mean, I don't want to cast blame on anyone and so forth. Maybe at the time, maybe I didn't make the right judgment. It could have been. And maybe he didn't make the right judgment at the time. But in the issue of corruption that he was talking about, I always held the position that I am not denying that we didn't have corruption, but I was saying it was never the extent of the corruption was never as was being said in the newspapers and all over the place. And I would have been against giving grace to the adding fuel to the opposition's fire against it, because they were manufacturing things, they were exaggerating things, they were taking things out of context, and they were doing these things, kept repeating it Goebbels like, without coming out with any kind of evidence, nothing concrete was being said. So I don't know how I was expected to discipline or to knock off people, and I didn't have anything concrete to go by. Apart from that, when I was president, we were in an awkward position. From the very moment that I became president and we got into the government, I had hoped at the beginning that we would have managed to work a better relationship with the PNC and the government would last. But from the moment they started to vote against the budget and so forth, and I knew that no confidence motion would be coming. I know that the government would not have made it into the 5 years. And for me, maybe it was a wrong judgment. I don't know. Later on, we can think about that. Future historians can probably pass judgment on it. But my thinking at the time was to keep the PPP as united as possible. Dismissing people at that time, and then if these people throw a quick election against me, and then I still have to do repair work behind me, would have been, to my mind, disastrous. And I tried to keep the PPP united, not to rock more boats. I was already having pressure from outside. Why should I create more problems inside? So that was my thinking at the time. But to talk again about corruption, many people came to me and told me this person was corrupt and that person was corrupt. But I said, but where is the evidence? Sometimes we even argued. I remember one man come to me and told me that Gildarie was going to steal the Marriott Hotel. And I said, tell me how. And his explanation was so convoluted that I said, boy, you crazy, it is not possible. But then I was shocked when another man who is highly qualified in finance came to me and said to me, I don't like how you're defending some of these things. I said, well, what things I'm defending that you don't like? And he mentioned to me the same Marriott issue. And I give him all the documents for the Marriott. I say, you go, you are even more qualified than I am. And tell me what you go and study this and tell me where the corruption is, how Gildarie can steal this thing. It's impossible what you're saying. He came back 2 weeks after and told me it's a very good project. So those were my experiences. I'm not trying to defend and say they didn't have any correction, but I would say what the PNC did effectively was to use corruption by government officers, not necessarily political people, and to paint a brush to say the whole government was corrupt. That is why it was I who piloted a motion in the National Assembly when I was still in the Parliament to bring the cameras to not only to look at the general debates that was going on, but to go into the committee meetings, including the Public Accounts Committee. And my thinking at the time was to let the public see a face, who we're talking about. Because some of the questions you questioning PSs or you questioning other officers had nothing to do with the PPP. Many of the corruption that they were talking about. And that was my thinking, to bring the cameras, particularly to the Public Accounts Committee, so that people could see a face. A lot of times they didn't come. When the opportunity they have for them to come, many times they didn't turn up to look at what was happening. And because I think that the PPP as a party was being blamed for things that was not, the corruption was not political corruption, but there was bureaucratic type of corruption in the place at the time.
Thank you. Mr. President, Mr. Ramotar, you have a good pension, but I can't say the same for a lot of people within Guyana. I think over the years there's been a culture of non-compliance, not paying the NIS, not paying the taxes, and so on. As we go forward, have you had a look at the model that we have for NIS? Have you had a look at our social protection for people? And of course, along the same veins of some advice for government as we go forward, we have a windfall from the oil and gas. How should we put in this money? Should we be placing the money in lump sum? Should we put it in
I
people's
think
hands?
I think NIS is I mean, it's not. I don't want to blame people now because I don't think that the problems that the NIS has, it's a problem of only of today. These are problems coming a long time, accumulating a long time. I think the first thing that needs to be done is to do a manpower audit of the NIS to see if to look at the management of it, to see sometimes if we don't have, if it's not overstaffed, creating inefficiencies and all of that. That's the first thing I think that needs to be done with the NIS. The NIS at one time, when it was making a lot of money in the sense that they didn't have to pay out so much of pensions and so forth, I think it was used politically in the days of the PNC for job for the boys and so forth, and that is some of affected it. But then there's a lot of inefficiency. Particularly sugar workers have suffered a lot with the inefficiency of the NIS. Many of them are retiring and couldn't get there, find out that they lost their contributions, and all of that type of thing has been happening. And what I see happening, I mean, look, I'm not in the center of things now, but just superficially, I think it's more like putting plaster on the sore than actually directly going. I think you need a good audit, a manpower audit, a good management audit of the NIS to see how we can make it more efficient, more slim, more, take.
Well, is it a problem, Mr. Ramotar, of a management problem at NIS, or is more of that our people are culturally wrong? I'm not sure, Freddie, you got to help me here. Is it that our people just don't like being compliant? Because let me tell you why. I've seen...
The former president can help you.
Let me tell you something. I mean, we got to be more tough with the private sector people. I hear all the time people talk how wonderful the private sector is, and they do some good work. But they also, many of them deliberately set out to rob the NIS, finding different ways and means to. Some of them collect people NIS money. They should go to jail for that, because these are ordinary workers who depend, when they reach the age, that they will have something to go on, and then they many of them don't pay in the NIS. I know they had many cases like that. Some of them finding ways and means around it. Making workers and say that you are contractors and you're not workers and so on and so forth. That is why I'm saying you need a study. You need a study in the NIS to go to all of these, not only the NIS, how it operates, but how it is being subverted by some of these people, and to correct them, apply the law to them and correct them.
And this is a topic we got to continue to have.
I have known you a very, very long time. We're about the same, entered political activism about the same time, same age, everything. And there's two characteristics I know about you. And we'll talk about that tonight. Now, I don't know if you can remember, but of course, I was the object, so I could remember. When you became General Secretary, I think I went to Freedom House to see you for something, and you showed me a socialist magazine, and they had a good critique of capitalism. And you showed me, said, Freddie, look at this thing. I think you gave it to me that I could have taken away. There's two characteristics I've known about your politics. You've always seemed to have some socialist bone in you, and you like international relations from the perspective of anti-imperialism. You still have those two characteristics, seeing that was, I know you 50 years ago.
Yes, I think over the years have convinced me more and more that those positions have been more or less correct. In my view, when Karl Marx wrote and said that capitalism, free competition capitalism, is going to evolve into monopoly and concentration of wealth, I don't think he had an idea of how much wealth could be concentrated.
Yeah, look at the US today.
When you think about 26 people the richest 26 people in this world, has more wealth than the bottom 50% of the world's population. I don't think Marx could have envisaged that, but he was perfectly right. The evolution of the things that's going according to Marx, in my view, according to the socialist direction that they say. One of the biggest problem in the world today is that the world is ripe for change, but the left-wing forces are so divided, so dispersed, that you don't have the forces to bring about the changes that are really necessary at this point in time, because it is impossible, or I think it's Marx, one of them wrote one time that something has to be terribly wrong with a system that produces so much wealth and at the same time produces so much poverty. Something has to be wrong with whatever those who might call me an old communist fogey and whatever label they want to put at me. But to me, that is true. That you have a system where you can feed the whole world. There is no need to have any starvation, no need to have poverty in the world, but we do have millions and hundreds of millions of people going to bed hungry, can't know where the next meal is coming from, uncertainty, lives are being wasted. So I have no apologies for my views. I think that there is definite need for that. As far as the international...
Well, I want to stop you and I want to tell you that you have two friends. I'm using the word friends.
I still believe too.
You have two friends, the Indian foreign minister and the South African foreign minister. When you listen to them speak about the international system, that's vintage Ramotar. They both believe that...
well, anybody who looks at the situation objectively must be vintage Ramotar.
Because they sound like you 40 years ago. Really, the Indian foreign minister and the South African foreign minister.
The situation is grim. But I also, to make this point, I still believe strongly. I still believe deeply. I am totally convinced that class is more important than race.
Of course.
I still believe that.
Most emphatically, Mr. President.
And if you look around, look at the United States from the time of President Carter, when he was promoting African Americans at the very top positions, to right down to now. You have an African American at the United Nations, an African American at the military area. Look at Britain. You got 3 Asians heading the country. Scotland, you have a Asian heading. What difference are they making to the lives of ordinary people? Yeah. What difference? So I still believe that we still needs to look at the class question, and unfortunately the left is like they're so divided, they're so caught up in LBGT and LBGTQ and F and all of that. I don't know what else they get caught up in.
LGBTQ. Where the F comes?
I don't know. I mean, there's so much a damn thing that you very quickly look at what I mean. Look at what's happening in the United States, and the left wing people are supporting some of these things. Children are going to change their sex and all of that. That is absolute nonsense. In my view, absolute nonsense. 8-year and 9-year-old person will know what sexual orientation they want to have and all of that. I know I could be criticized by the local people here tomorrow, and I'm willing to accept that criticism. But I still think it's nonsense to be going to this type of extreme, and all of that. The left.
That's the American sociological aberration.
All of that. The left-wing politics are getting sidetracked with all this nonsense instead of focusing on other important issues, economics and other things, the politics. and so forth.
Mr. President, could you tell me, in your opinion, if you have a feeling that maybe there's an area that we're not really paying attention to? I'm talking specifically with the government, that you would really like to see as a former president, that they pay more attention to that.
Look, the government is doing a lot of things that are benefiting people greatly. But I think the benefits could be more, not only by throwing money at the problem, but by doing certain other things. Let's take health, for instance. I just saw how many women died in childbirth, how many children died, and what have you. I had also a personal experience where a niece of mine went in to do a operation for gallstone and died.
At the Georgetown Hospital?
At the Georgetown Hospital. And why is this thing happening? Why is it happening? It is not the lack of resources. The government has been putting the money there. It's organization. I think the time has come when doctors and nurses who work at the public institutions should not have a job at another institution. If you go to all the private hospitals in this country and look at the list of doctors at those private institutions and look at the list of the public hospital, they're all the same people. How can a doctor work at 4 and 5
Oh, I got a serious problem with that. And why are we paying people hold on, Freddie Kissoon, Mr. Ramotar, why are we paying doctors from our public funds to work at a private at a public hospital, and then they're also being paid, and are those monies being declared to the government and taxes being paid?
And not only that, I mean, I don't know, you guys are probably interact with more people than I do from time to time, but some of the stories that I hear are horror stories, the amount of the fees that some of these doctors charge. One person only 2 days ago told me that one doctor took $5 million on them to do an operation. And that is also, if you look at how much money
this doctor charged them $5
million. Many people sometimes got to go and mortgage their property sometimes. But therefore, I think the time has come.
They couldn't do the thing at the Georgetown
Hospital.
The time
has come. I mean, if you want the doctors who work at all the different hospitals, the same doctors, how long they will do one operation in the hospital and then go on to the private hospital to do it? And apart from that, if you look at pharmaceutical, how much money we spend on pharmaceutical, but I still hear people tell me, look, my brother died recently, I went to the West Amara, I met people at the wake who was coming and telling me that this clinic doesn't have any drugs. This clinic don't have any drugs. There's absolutely no reason for that, and the only thing that can be happening with the pilfering is taking place. The government is providing the resources and buying the thing that there for them, but it is not there. So I think that some of the issues don't need money. It needs organization. It needs better management.
Honest people, Mr. Ramotar.
I'm looking at my mouth.
At least the minimum. I personally believe that nobody working in the public hospital should work at a private hospital. But I will make one concession. The period when their shift should be, they should be at the public hospital. They must be found there at all times.
I'm looking at my mango pelt. Our time has come. So let me ask you, let me see if I can get in 2 tiny questions. One is, why are you not right? The last time I was here, you were here, you gave a negative response, for want of a better word. I wonder if you're going to have the same negative response. Are you writing your memoir?
But, I mean, let's put it.
Look, some of the things you said.
I'm an ordinary guy. I came up from Karya. My experience.
Tell us, where's Karya?
Karya used to be a very far away place where I was a child. It used to take us a long time. We had to sometimes come with boat at Parika and sleep at the Sterling to catch a train to come to town, and it took a long time. Now You could go with high-speed engine. You could go and come back. You can leave after breakfast.
So
and
where's
be back.
Gildarie?
It's in the Essequibo River, the west bank of the Essequibo River. Not on the coast. People mistake it because it's in the river itself, on the west bank of the Essequibo River, between Supernam and, well, I don't know how many people know Saxakari. Between Supernam and Saxakari.
Supernam, I think you gotta go up.
You gotta go into the river, not on the coast,
right.
The area. No, but so my experience is similar to thousands of other Guyanese. I mean, okay, I did reach the very top of the country's political and
the pinnacle of
the highest
politics.
Office. I'm proud of that from another point of view, because I remember Dr. Jagan's speech when the University of Guyana was being opened in 1963. He wasn't in the country. He was at the time in England with the negotiating about the independence and so forth, the independence talks. The Deputy Premier Bindi Ben read the speech. And he said there, he spoke about the importance of the university and democracy. He saw a link with university and democracy. And he also said that he wanted the university to play a role so that the highest office in the land will not be the preserve of the well-born, but the person in the farthest part of the villages on the coast or in the deepest interior can have the same possibility to that office as anyone else. And I think I was the first graduate of the University of Guyana to have become president, and for that I'm a bit proud that in a way I fulfilled the dream of my mentor.
Our operator signal, our time has come. How is I've always found your wife to have a very pleasant attitude to me over the decades I've known her. How is she doing? She's a very, very pleasant woman.
Yeah, she's doing all right. She's keeping herself busy too, doing different things to keep herself occupied, not to do anything and then deteriorate. But she's quite busy too.
But you still didn't answer the question.
Yeah.
You went all along with carry up. Why you're not writing your memoir?
I think there are other more important things to write about. I think there are things like so much. I replied to Hamilton Green in a letter recently about all the distortion about federation, about the distortion about the 60s that they, and I think those are the things that needs to be cleared up, because there's a lot of things in our history that is so misrepresented that I think it needs more investigation. I think the racial question is also totally misrepresented too in our life. The origins of the problems, how it developed, why it developed, and what is the solution. I also strongly believe that the solution, we will not have a solution as long as we have the PR system in place for our electoral system.
You want to go back to first past the post?
I think that first past the post is, we got to force the PNC to remove from this racism and this racial politics that they are on all the time. We got to force them to take, they won't do it voluntarily. We have to force them to take national positions. And although I'm not saying it's a magic wand that will solve the problem right away, but history has shown with other countries that the first past the post system forces political parties to look at more national issues, fight on more national issues than on sectorial issues of race and religion and that type of thing.
But seriously, Mr. President, aren't we witnessing a disintegration of the PNC never seen before?
That is making them more racist. That what you were saying. There's a definite weakening of the PNC, but as they become weaker, they rely on wanting to keep a mass supported racism, and that is why you see that the new leader of the PNC Northern has more or less defended what Ogunsai has said. And they are more or less defending all of the racism that they being spouted in the media and so forth. So they are becoming, they're trying to create more, and they're not without success. When you take into consideration the fact that two young African Guyanese boys were killed on the west coast of Bobby's, has nothing to do with politics. But the PNC leadership going to visit the place, and after that, the whole place explodes. Right? You see also the protest started with somebody who was shot, police shooting in Golden Grove on the East Coast. They marched in and beat unsuspecting Indians at Monrepo. Or you have recently in Buxton, police went in to catch a drug man, and another explosion taking place.
We gotta do
it
this.
shows you that there is the PNC is making some gains in being able to motivate ordinary African Guyanese to take those kind of actions when there is no justification for those type of actions.
We got to end on happy note. You're not writing your memoir. Let's hope for now. But our operator signal that we're 4 minutes past our time. There's much more to talk about. Let's hope the next time we have you here, Ralph Amkaran said he's at page 40 of his memoir. Let's hope by the next time we see you, you're page 80. It was indeed a pleasure.
I would love to see a former president have a talk show, a call-in program in which he answers questions.
Yeah, would you do that? Would you come in? So we're going to have a call-in program.
That would be interesting.
Right. Yeah. Thanks for being here, and thanks for viewing and listening to one of Guyana's most enduring politicians. This has been the Gildarie Freddie Kissoon Show. After the show is over, please go on YouTube, punch in Gildarie Freddie Kissoon, and you will see the hour of former President Donald Ramotar and some of the revelations he made. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you on Wednesday. Arrivederci, au revoir, bye-bye, sayonara, or whatever they say around the world. In good old Guyana, catch you later.